Welcome to the Unmuted Podcast. My name is Jeff. I'm your host, and this is a podcast about all things HR, talent, HR tech, world of work. And so we run these podcast episodes every week on Thursdays, and they also live on our website, GoScaleHR.com. We also have a YouTube channel as well. So if you want to hit the like button, share your comment, share it with the world, do what you want. Unfortunately, we're not trending like Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau, but maybe one day. Anyway, okay, so we have a fantastic topic here today. It's called the ripple effect of manager effectiveness on HR. And we have a fantastic guest, Laura Goodridge, who is also a good friend of mine. I can call her a friend. And so we've done, lots of work together. So Laura's going to help us break it all down, this really important topic. I think it's probably one that HR practitioners think about a lot, during the course of their work. And I think, sometimes there's this thing called the dual role of managers, of HR managers. So HR plays a critical role in shaping org culture, strategy, the employee experience. But ultimately, the managers are the frontline leaders. They're the ones who sort of make or break it. So their effectiveness or lack thereof significantly impacts not just their team, but also HR's ability to focus on long-term goals instead of firefighting day-to-day issues. And I'm pretty sure people watching this are probably shaking their head and nodding in agreement. So that's the first point. The second point, that I want to make is the challenge of what I call the challenge of managerial dependency. Okay. So managers often lean heavily on HR for guidance. And of course, it's probably different in, different types of organization. It's probably different based on your, level of experience. But when this dependency becomes excessive, it can lead to significant inefficiencies. So HR is pulled into everything, to address small, routine matters, which can overshadow truly strategic or urgent challenges. So this episode really is about exploring the root of this dynamic and how to foster manager independence, right, without compromising support. Right. So there's a lot there, but essentially the relationship between a frontline manager, other managers, and HR, and then how that sort of balances out. So there's a lot to talk about here, and we're going to break it all down. So Laura Goodridge is an expert when it comes to leadership, coaching, but you know what? I'm going to let her talk about herself. And so Laura, I want to welcome you to the Unmuted podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Jeff. I'm really happy to be here. Great intro, and I would definitely say that we're friends, whether you like it or not. So you're stuck with me.
Excellent. Okay, so I was thinking, it's been a while. Like I realized, but I haven't had you on my podcast, and I was like, that's odd. And I'm like, because I've known you for so long, and I thought I would have asked you by now. But anyway, so we've solved that problem. And so, just for our viewers, maybe you can tell our viewers sort of what you do and your core focus right now.
Yeah, so my background is extensive in HR. So I've got 11, 12 years experience as a HR practitioner, moving from entry level up to head of HR for a high growth, fast paced tech company, and recently pivoted into focusing directly on manager development. And I do that through two avenues. I do one-on-one coaching, which is a blend of what I call coach learning. So they're learning fundamental skills of becoming a manager, as well as the coaching support in order to apply the learning that they're having into application in their day-to-day. Secondly, I also deliver a manager development program called Spark Training in partnership with Ben Group and Kendra Johnson. That's an incredible program that focuses on a similar ethos to myself when it comes to learning and development as well as coaching. So again, it applies that coach learning approach of focused, dedicated manager development training and coaching in between to really focus on the application of what managers are learning. So that's where I'm focusing right now, and I'm really enjoying it. It's been a topic that I've noticed I've gravitated towards throughout my HR career, noticing the impact of manager effectiveness on HR and my role as a HR professional. So obviously the topic is something that is very well linked to what I do now.
So that was a great, overview. So let's dive into it then, okay? Because I think, obviously, from my perspective, it's always been a huge issue, and so let's get into it. So I guess my first question for you is, from your point of view, how does a manager's effectiveness directly impact the role of HR in just any organization?
Yeah, so something that HR and managers have in common is that they actually focus on three key areas. And sometimes I think we forget that we actually have more in common than we do separate. And this kind of can be applied to every department really when it comes to working with HR. The three areas are one being performance. So this is how the company is performing and therefore how is it maintaining itself, how is it reinvesting in itself, and how is it safeguarding itself. The second is engagement. So how does the company's biggest asset, which is its people, become aligned to what the company aims to achieve, and how does it do that? And then thirdly is retention. So this is about retaining talent, retaining knowledge in order to keep the company moving. Now, they are not just three areas that HR look at. These are areas that managers in every department should be focusing on at its basic level. And if one of those areas is not being held up by either party, then the scales will tip. And it's not a game of them and us, or they're not doing it, we are, and vice versa. It's really about both parties working together in tandem on the same subject. So they're symbiotic. One can impact the other. An example of this that I found is like HR can produce fantastic documentation, policies, procedures when it comes to engagement for managers in order to create fairness and a great environment for people to work in. An easy one is like the legendary handbook that HR spends hours creating, hours, days, weeks creating. HR can do that, but it is actually up to the managers to know the process, make an effort to read and understand how things are done around here, and use the tools that are provided. Equally, if managers have feedback for HR on how process is being used, then it's up to them. It's their responsibility to feedback as well. So they feed off each other. And what often happens in my experience is management aren't always aware of the entirety of their role, and managing people is really hard work. It's usually the biggest shock when people go from an individual contributor role into managing people. It's a really hard journey, but it's part of their job and ultimately the manager's responsibility to take their people through these processes. HR can consult and support, provide guidance, guidelines, but they're not here to apply those processes and guidelines to the manager's team. Now, when formal process comes into play, yes, HR will be there and will be involved and will be monitoring the process. But if, for example, a manager's team isn't putting their vacation into the system, that's not for HR to have to monitor. That's for managers to make sure that they're holding their teams accountable. Because if HR is focusing on the small things like that, like basic manager responsibilities, it really is taking them away from the larger scale initiatives for those three areas of performance, engagement, and retention. And that takes them away from strategy, which is not a good use of HR's time.
So I think you nailed it totally. When it comes to that sort of balance, and it's not easy. I mean, obviously it's really hard because I think, because if it were easy, we would have solved this problem decades ago. So, okay, so just want to shift just a little bit here. So what are the common pitfalls that you see that managers fall into that create friction between the employees and HR, and then how can organizations address them? So talking about some of the pitfalls, talking about from a manager's point of view.
Yeah. To put it bluntly, I think there is a lack of understanding of what HR does and what their purpose is. Because HR does work closely with decision makers to provide consultation, maybe even to managers, providing them consultation if they're moving into a role first. But often what happens is HR then becomes this scapegoat. So managers will become very reliant on HR because they were very helpful in the beginning, but as HR starts to pull away and hold them accountable to their new role and responsibilities, we get common phrases like, HR told me so. HR said I couldn't give you that pay rise. And it becomes kind of the manager will pit themselves against HR without knowing. They're trying to, calm the employee that may be in a bit of a pickle for themselves. But what the manager isn't telling them is that there is a rigorous process around what HR does and how they apply something like salary increases. It's not just about them saying, yes or no. There's conversations with the entire leadership team, including like financial reviews. Can the company apply certain things company wide rather than just individually? We're looking at equality, equity. Their application doesn't just happen without thought. And I think the employee will not necessarily consider that from their point of view. They're only looking at it from their experience, which is absolutely fine and understandable. But it's naive to think that the kind of not right now was a decision that was made like flippantly without thought or made in jest. And I think sometimes employees don't understand the work that goes behind a process. Something that's very close to my heart is mergers and acquisitions. To an employee, they just seem to happen overnight, but they take months, sometimes years to process. There's considerations that an employee would not have thought about because it's not their role to do that, right? So I think while HR can sometimes be seen as like this agony aunt, it's not their purpose. Like, sure, we see a lot of patterns and we make sound judgments, but I feel like too often employees can think HR is against them just because they haven't said yes to everything that they want. There is a naivety around the processes that HR follow in order to create fairness, equality, etc.
I totally agree with that. I always considered, like, I always thought that sometimes in certain organizations, in some cases, it almost seems like managers take the easy route to avoid having those sort of difficult conversations or having to make difficult or sensitive choices. So they lean on HR, and it's almost like they just dump it all on them. And I think that, obviously I've been in HR for, many years. But I think how you kind of classified that is perfect. And trust me, I'm not complaining here. We're just being real and being honest, right? Okay. So let's talk about some of the sort of the solution side of things. And so how can HR balance providing necessary support to managers while encouraging them to take ownership of their team and responsibility? This is like the classic, like my phrase many years ago was, well, Mr. or Madam Manager, you get paid the big bucks, so you have to take ownership for it.
Yeah, that's a really great question because it's something that I fell into the trap with in terms of my own development throughout my HR career. And usually what happens is HR gets pushed to a point until they pop or crack, as I like to say, and then stuff starts to change. And I think sometimes HR is there and they are conscious around how to create really great environments so that people can thrive. And ultimately, they understand that if people are happier in their role, they're aligned to what the company's doing, they will perform better. There's so many stats out there for that. I don't need to recite any. The way in which I have found helpful in my own career is it is okay for managers to come to you for support, but there are boundaries that have to be set, and it takes the HR individual to set them up for themselves. One way to do that, to provide balance in providing support, is to focus on coaching versus telling. All too often it is, and this isn't just HR, this is managers as well, and this is sometimes where the friction comes in. Managers haven't taken the time to really coach someone, such as an employee or a peer, through an issue. So no one's learning anything from it, whether it's learning a process, learning how they feel about something, balancing their emotions about something, and they will just want to give an answer. And so coaching versus telling someone is a huge, I think, valued skill, because it stops, it's actually spending a bit of time up front in order to prevent this reluctancy to solve an issue for themselves. So if a manager is coming to HR pushing the question back, right, like getting them from a coaching perspective to answer it themselves and supporting them solving the problem, you're creating a habit for them to do that prior to coming to you. And it's like, if you want to have a more accountable, responsible team, you have to demonstrate that. And I think that comes part and parcel with the HR role. But what happens is HR becomes so busy because they're so involved in so many other things, carrying the weight of what feels like the world on their shoulders. Sometimes they fall into that trap of, it's just easier if I just tell them what to do.
100%. I totally agree with that.
I've done it a number of times. I just got tingles as I said that. I'm recalling so many times where I've just said that, I'll just tell them what to do. But consciously what you're doing is you're teaching and reiterating that someone can just come to you without even trying to solve an issue for themselves. So that would be my advice, is like focus on coaching versus telling, because a little bit more time spent up front will save you and buy back so much time in future.
I totally agree with all of that. And I think this is one of the reasons why I think that we've gotten along so well, is because, I take that sort of similar approach. It's really about sort of some enabling managers to think, to use their brain power. And, look, they're all smart people because they got there somehow. So, and most of them have the answers. It's either the lack of confidence or just the shaping of, behavior that, obviously HR has allowed, over time. But I think also too, it also shows, and this segues into my next question, HR as an industry, we need to be great coaches, right? For ourselves, so that we can actually, deploy coaching so that we can show how, it's done. I don't know if we're really that skilled as an industry at real, effective coaching. So my next question for you is, and this is my last one, what strategies can organizations use, implement, to improve manager effectiveness? So, and the goal here is to really reduce the dependency on HR, for everyday issues.
Yeah, and something that really comes to mind following on what you were just saying is coaching isn't just for managers, it's for everybody. And coaching is a way of having a conversation to enable someone else to come to a resolution that they likely already know, they just haven't had the space to talk it out. And once you start to learn how coaching works, you can ask for it. And that's my favorite thing when managers turn up to a quick session with HR. That could be just a quick meeting. HR asks one question, and you can watch the manager figuring it out for themselves. And so the less you say, the better, because you're allowing that thinking space for a manager. But it's something that needs to be learned, because managers, before people become a manager, they spend their entire career being really great individual contributors, which is me, myself, and I. Yes, there is team in there. Yes, there is what we do as a group of people, but we are a group of people working as individuals. And we spend, if you become a manager after 10 years of a career as an individual contributor, you now have to stop thinking as an individual and think, how can I get this work done through other people, which is huge. And so that switch happens overnight, and learning how to coach is part of that. But coaching takes practice, it takes time. And it's not just about the manager learning to coach, it's about their manager knowing how to coach. It's about HR knowing how to coach. And often what happens with HR is they learn how to coach by default rather than a training program for them on how to get really good at coaching so that they can demonstrate that to the rest of the company. And I don't know of any formal HR development programs in any company. It's usually always outsourced, and HR may or may not get a small opportunity to attend some manager development training, but often HR doesn't get actually much invested in it unless there is a really conscious CPO, head of HR, that's truly investing in their team. A lot of what they learn is by default. So I would say a coaching program opportunity for everybody, so that you're actually teaching even individual contributors how to hold space and teach other people how to use their knowledge, their skills, their brains.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is, and not just because I do this for a living, but overall leadership development for all levels. And what I have known to be true is there are a cluster of skills that I like to call human skills rather than soft skills, because they're not soft, they're actually really hard. And so I like to call them human skills, but there is a subsection of human skills that every leader needs to understand. However, it's not just a one and done. Every time you progress as a leader, you have to relearn how to apply those skills. So going into a team lead role, learning a subsection of skills. Going into a manager role where you might be managing managers, I got to relearn those skills in this context. Going into a department role where you're leading, department director role where you might be leading managers of team leads. So every level comes with relearning these skills. So overall coaching for everybody and overall leadership development for everybody that's on a continuum. It doesn't just stop at one learning program that you go through 6 years ago.
And it's not just a one-time thing too. This has to be a 24/7, 365 day a year thing. It has to be like a full investment all the time. we've had this conversation many times, when we've worked with, many different organizations on this sort of concept. But yes, it costs money. But you know what? The investment of time up front and will yield major benefit, down the road for each individual, but also as a collective unit. And if your focus is to improve performance for, your company, there's probably no better way to do it than to invest in your people properly. I'm not talking about a one-stop shop, one little workshop, and then you just shove it away in the drawer somewhere. No. That does nothing. So you're just throwing money away. This is a concerted, embedded, proper, full effort.
Yeah, and I really agree with that. I'm all about continuation of learning because it's never a one and done. There's multiple situations. Like HR are learning different situations and usually are never surprised by the situation because they've been so surprised early in their career. But the other thing is taking a stand and teaching everybody a skill will enable that skill to become embedded into the company. Coaching isn't just a skill that managers have. It's a skill that what if everybody in the company knew how to coach, therefore they could problem solve quicker, which would mean that less unnecessary dependence on HR, so that when there was dependency on HR for the things that HR provide, that would be such a great thing to have. But yet we as companies sometimes we hoard certain skills to certain levels, which what if every single person in the company knew how to coach? How much peer-to-peer coaching would happen? How much peer-to-peer coaching between employees would happen, which would give back time to the managers, which would give back time to HR, which would give back time to leadership, right? So it's sometimes there is a real opportunity, instead of hoarding a skill, is a coaching philosophy what the company wants, because it will always have an impact on HR because there will be less dependency on quote unquote unnecessary things, allowing space for the necessary where HR can shine and step in. So,
agreed. All right. So I could go on forever, but I'm not, and I'm sure that you have other things to do too. So what is, if listeners can just sort of take one thing away from anything that you've talked about, so what would that one thing be?
I connect with a lot of HR people that tend to be a team of one, particularly in the startup world. And so I've been a team of one many times and it's really difficult. I think I would say if you are a team of one, 80% is usually more than adequate. And I mean that in a way that getting a project, an initiative, a process to 80% is better than not starting at all. Getting to 80%, let something simmer, get feedback, because you can always improve it. And that actually encourages agility and keeps you moving in the direction that is necessary for your team, because that last 20% takes 100% more effort than it did to get to 80%. And as a team of one, you cannot and will not be everything to everyone. So pick initiatives and strategies that are fitting for your company. There's a lot of blanket statements out there about every company needs this, every culture needs this, but you need to think about what it is that your company is striving for, how it wants to get there, because that then allows individuals to pick you as a company that they feel they will thrive in. I think sometimes HR feels like they have to be everything to everyone, and that's not the case. There are so many great companies out there that don't match everybody's needs. So get good at what you've got. Starting something and getting it to 80% is better than nothing, and it actually encourages quite a lot of agility.
So with that, thank you, Laura, for being here. I'm sure that we will do this again. So thanks for being here. I appreciate your time and your wisdom. So for everybody, once again, the Unmuted Podcast, we talk about all things HR, hiring, talent, HR tech, world of work. Our episodes live on our website at GoScaleHR.com. Also on our YouTube channel as well. So, hit the like button, subscribe so you can get notified. And also leave your comment. I want to hear from you. I love a good debate, and just be respectful. That's all I ask. So yes, so Laura, thank you for being.
Thank you very much. Really love this conversation as always.